What is the difference between a 17-grid 3D LUT and a 65-grid 3D LUT? Which LUT should you use? We're going to cover that and more with a working example to show those differences in today's video. Let's talk about LUTs. LUTs help us speed up our workflows in post-production. LUTs help us monitor on set to help us judge our exposure choices. LUTs help us tell our story through color and contrast. But what happens when LUTs go totally wrong? To answer that question, we have to get technical and understand why not all LUTs are created equal. And when I say get technical, I don't mean Gerald Undone technical, rather the dumbed down Carlos version. I just want to make sure that we're all clear here. This is our working example and a starting point on our log image. And this is what happens to that log image when I applied a 33-grid 3D LUT. The LUT broke my image. But why? Feel free to leave a comment if you want to try and clarify any of what I'm about to say here. Let's start with what a LUT is trying to do. A LUT attempts to identify luminance, saturation, contrast, and color values from a log source. This is why everything looks flat when we shoot in log, and that flat waveform expands after we apply a LUT. You can think of a LUT as a map that gives specific and in some cases highly detailed information about how to get from point A to point B. That detailed information is commonly stored in a .cube file. Now let's talk about the types of LUTs and cube files. There are 1D LUTs and there are 3D LUTs. As I understand it, a 1D LUT are the most accurate and the least flexible when it comes to creativity. If there's enough interest, I will explain why I said what I just said in a different video. 3D LUTs are what we generally use most often and use on set to monitor and in post to color correct and color grade our image, or we use it as a starting point for our final grade. If you use Resolve, you know that 3D LUTs come in 3 different flavors: 17-grid 3D LUT, 33-grid 3D LUT, and 65-grid 3D LUT. What's the difference between a 17-grid 3D LUT and a 65-grid 3D LUT? That, along with which Canon provided LUT should I use to correct my Canon log footage, are the 2 most popular questions that I've ever gotten since I started my channel. I've attempted to answer this question previously and likely butchered the explanation, so let me give it one more shot and try now. In summary, think of it as good, better, and best. A 17-grid 3D LUT is good. A 33-grid 3D LUT is better. And a 65-grid 3D LUT is the best. I have friends who are hyper-technical. They will likely and surely disagree with what I just said. So let me show you why I said what I just said and explain. We have to understand that at best, a LUT, even a technical LUT, is guessing. That's right, they are guessing at what exactly we want them to do and how we want them to behave based on what we shot. Let's revisit the how to get from point A to point B analogy. Let's pretend that we needed instructions on how to get from Long Beach, California to Fargo, North Dakota. All the details on exactly how to get from Long Beach and end up in Fargo are captured in log. Now we simply need a way to help our transportation source to understand that information. The transportation source is your deliverable. For most of us who deliver to the web, social media, or any type of short-lived online content, and even broadcast commercials, that generally speaking means Rec 709. So we need to take the log information and convert it to Rec 709. Those are the directions or the instructions on how to get from Long Beach and end up in Fargo. A 17-grid 3D LUT basically says, hey, this is where Long Beach, California is located, and this is where Fargo, North Dakota is located. So connect the dots. You can see how this approach could become problematic, right? A 17 grid 3D LUT is only really concerned about where the starting point is and where the endpoints are. And if those are correct, then essentially it thinks it's done doing its job. Obviously, I am way oversimplifying here. I personally find that 17 grid 3D LUTs work great with 8-bit log footage. What does a 33 grid 3D LUT have to offer though? Well, a 33 grid 3D LUT begins to add specificity to the how to get from Long Beach and end up in Fargo question. For example, it will identify that taking a straight line from point A to point B is a bad idea if you don't own a jet and have airspace clearance and a flight-worthy transportation source. For those of you who are old enough, or if you want to Google something, think of it as old school GPS back before wireless networks. Old school GPS, generally speaking, got you to where you were going. But sometimes it told you to make a turn into a road that flat out wasn't there. So that's kind of what I'm saying here. A 33 grid 3D LUT is what we need and use on set in our production monitors, and it's considered broadcast quality. So if you're creating your own LUTs or working out a LUT for your monitor, it should really be a 33 grid 3D LUT. I found that 33 grid 3D LUTs were great on set and when applied to 10-bit log footage. That is until recently. Check this out. This clip was captured on the 1DX Mark III in 4K. That is oversampled 4K from the sensor and it is 10-bit. So what went wrong here? This is where we have to roll up our sleeves and dive headfirst into this weird analogy or concept that I've been trying to articulate. You remember I said LUTs are basically trying to guess, right? Well, if the 17 grid 3D LUT only cared about the start and end point, Long Beach and Fargo, and the 33 grid 3D LUT gave us more specific instructions like take the highway and make sure that you use a specific on-ramp and a specific off-ramp, then what went wrong? Well, in a scene like this one, we are able to identify absolute white. We can also identify a white clip point, and we can do the same for black and its own clip point. So what's missing? It's actually more intuitively obvious than what it appears. The detailed information on how to get from one of the middle points to the next value are missing. In other words, all of the gradient information from the dark areas into the midtones, those details are missing. And the details on how to get from the midtones to the highlights is also missing. So the 33 grid 3D LUT is guessing. And because this is a high dynamic range scene with a lot of gradients, it simply fails. And what this clearly shows all of us, including my hyper-technical friends out there, is that the grid value matters. 3D color space, information density matters. At least to me, at this point, it definitely appears to matter. In an attempt to prove this, let's see what happens when we apply the same corrections via a 65 grid 3D LUT. You see, in this scene, the 65 grid 3D LUT is able to resolve more gradient information points, which allow the LUT to be applied without the banding and the artifacts. Or should I say, without banding artifacts prior to the uploading to social media, since I don't know what will happen once the YouTube compression does its damage. Gradients for people like me who like to pixel peep are what drive us to seek higher image quality and spend more money on higher end cameras. But in some cases, it likely isn't the camera because not all LUTs are created equal. I'll catch up with you guys in the comments. Take care. Audio check. You got me? Okay. Should we have a go at it? What is the difference between a 17 grid 3D LUT and a 65 grid 3D LUT? That's what we're going to cover in today's video. So if you want to check it out, be sure to swipe up or check a link in the bio so you can let me know what you guys think. So now that the intro is out of the way, let's try to make this happen. They're mowing the lawn and the microphone is picking it up. Shocker. Okay, so now it seems like they've moved on. Let's see if we could pull this off. The transportation source is your deliverable.